Again. Right. There you go. Well, welcome everybody to our special One Mississippi online event featuring authors of the river. In particular, we are joined today by Paul Schneider. We'll also hear from Cole Williams in this event. And most of you, I definitely recognize. It's so good to see you. Either by face, I recognize you, or by name, because you've been a part of our vibrant river citizen community. But just in case you are brand new here, I just want to set the stage of who we are. So the Mississippi River Network is a coalition of over 60 organizations up and down the Mississippi working together to help create a healthy river for people, land, water, and wildlife. The network implements a public program, the only public program, in fact, that runs the entire length of the mighty Mississippi, and that is called One Mississippi, where we focus on educating and inspiring people, everyday people, to stand up, speak up, and take action for the Mississippi River. We've built a community of over 20,000 people called River Citizens. And these are everyday people from armchairs to wading boots that the river can count on, right? I have a picture up on this slideshow. This has been one of my favorite images of the year. And it's a group of river citizens that participated in our network's River Days of Action initiative, which takes place in June. You'll hear more about that over the months ahead. And I see Mark River Peoples on the call today, joining the event. This event was hosted by Mark River, who's based with the Quapaw Canoe Company, and he's our outreach coordinator on the lower river. He took out a group of people, got them out on the river, connecting in a deep way. And they also, went above and beyond and did some more trash cleanup, right? At the end of the event, they took an advocacy action. And it's just a great example of the community of river citizens and people that are taking action to make the Mississippi River a better place. During today's event, if you have not become a river citizen, Misa will share the link in the chat. Go ahead and join our community so you stay in the loop. And then also today, we're going to share, we have a really time-sensitive action alert. Many of you may be familiar, it's called the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force, and they are tasked with a big job, and that is helping reduce pollution in the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. Many of you will be familiar with the dead zone, the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, this hypoxic zone where the water quality is so bad, there's no oxygen remaining in the water due to a series of processes that is fueled by pollution, namely nitrogen and phosphorus, running in excess on our fields, in our streets, running into our waterways, down into the Gulf of Mexico, where it creates this annual Gulf of Mexico dead zone. I think this past year, at the top of my head, the size of it was over 1.5 million football fields. If you put them all together, this is a big area we're talking about. And so Misa will share in the chat a 1-minute action that you all can take today. And that's sending an email to this Gulf Hypoxia Task Force, asking them to prioritize a basin-wide holistic management approach for the Mississippi River that also focuses on restoring wetlands and different nature-based solutions like continuous living cover and cover crop to help reduce this pollution from entering into the waterway. So please take a minute with that link. Send the email. It's all set up for you. An easy way to make a difference today, and really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to pass the mic here in just a second, I promise. But before I do that, ground you into our event today. We'll hear from Cole Williams with the video recording of reading a couple poems from her book, Hear the River Damned, Poems from the Edge of the Mississippi. Our featured guest today is Paul Schneider, author of Old Man River. Paul will share more about his work, about his book, about his passions with the river. I had a great privilege of meeting Paul. Gosh, what was it, 3-4 years ago now?
Maybe more, yeah.
And as it was, we were able to meet on the banks of the river in Dubuque, Iowa. And I had the privilege to listen to Paul share about his work and everything that went into the research for Old Man River. And unfortunately, we don't have the same time abilities today. I think Paul presented for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half even. It could have went on. The audience was on the edge of their seats. It was a very, very informative presentation. And then, I think my favorite part, Paul, was just you and I sitting out at the river after that, chatting to the wee hours of the night. Yeah. And, I hope with everyone on this call that we all get that opportunity to be together in person or through more events like this and just keep getting to know each other, because all of you are carrying pieces of the puzzle to help create a healthier and more resilient Mississippi River for the people, land, water, and wildlife. And we can't wait to get to know your pieces more and more. So, did I mention we'll have a book giveaway? We'll have 2 books actually we're giving away today. A live drawing during about the middle of the event, and then we'll close with a Q&A at the end. Throughout this event, please put questions into the chat, and then we'll just bring those to the Q&A at the end. That'll be the best way to do it. Paul, if you have other preferences while you're presenting, feel free to say otherwise, but we'll lead with that. And are we all ready? Should we get going? Awesome. So Cole Williams, I'm going to pass it over to Gretchen to share more. This very special person in our community. Gretchen.
Fantastic. You're hearing me okay? All good. Okay. So Michael mentioned that we have a video from Cole Williams. She was not able to be here today. She really, really wanted to be here with all of you. And she sent her best wishes. She's at a writer's retreat and she just had poor reception. So she didn't want to risk trying to do that with poor reception or be here with the poor reception. But she did send an absolutely amazing video, and we are going to show that video. But before we do, I just wanted to share a little bit of a context about Cole Williams and about her book, Here the River Damned. So again, Cole is one of our river citizens, and she reached out to us actually after Michael sent an email asking her, he sends this to all of our river citizens, often look for these emails. He asks all of you to tell us about yourselves. And she said, hey, I've written 2 books about the river. So we followed up with her and formed this wonderful relationship. And we're going to be giving away a signed copy of this book. And we've been offering this book throughout the month as part of our fundraising campaign. These are all copies that Cole has donated to us. So a little bit about Here the River Damned. It's a poetry collection. It is an award-winning book. It won the Book Excellence Award. It's a finalist for that. And it also won the Living Now Award in the Books for Better Living. The book is described as poetry with purpose because Cole intends to inspire appreciation and action. And at the end of the book, there's actually a resource section, and it includes how to help your water with a variety of different tips, ranging from simple ideas to the more advanced, complex ideas. And then she has a list of organizations that work on the Mississippi River, including One Mississippi, and we're super grateful for that. So I'm going to read just a little bit from the introduction. I think it's really important because I think it'll give you greater appreciation for what you're going to see in the video. So this is from Cole, from the introduction. When I first told people my family was moving into a home on the Mississippi River, I was greeted with an assortment of antipathy and confused looks. The usual responses would entail musing such as, ew, that river is so gross. Do you swim in it? Or, you know what they did to that river, right? You don't eat fish from there, do you? These queries left me slow to respond with something salient enough to sway the misconceptions, partially because I myself did not know if these claims carried legitimacy. But I wanted to know. I wanted to supply them with an introspective answer that was fair and inspiring. I believe we should never lose the curiosity of a child, the traveler, even if only exploring in our own backyards, or the scientist. So I'm not going to read the full introduction, but Cole goes on to explain how she got to know the river and learn more about the river. And then I'm going to jump back in to another section of the introduction. Cole says, my writing goal with his poetry collection was rather simplistic in nature. I wanted to write for 1 year about the river, once every 2 to 3 days. It was meant to be a flow of consciousness project to soak in the surroundings and also to develop my voice. I created about 120 poems that year. My overarching goal was to use writing as a commitment to observe and learn. So this book is that exercise that Cole took, and it starts in June of 1 year and ends in June of the next. So it takes you through the seasons. And one of the really cool things about the video that we're about to show is that Cole shot this near her home on the river. So she described her home. So this was shot near Spring Lake Park in Minnesota. And this is where most of the poems were composed. So you're getting a bird's eye view into the inspiration for this book, as well as hearing Cole read her beautiful poems in a winter wonderland setting on the river. So with that, I turn it back to you, Michael, to start the video.
Wonderful. The audio will come across really well, but don't be surprised if the video is a little laggy.
Hello, and welcome to the event this afternoon. My name is Cole Williams, and I'm going to read you a couple poems from my book, Hear the River Damned, Poems from the Edge of the Mississippi. Thank you for attending One Mississippi's fundraising event today. And thank you, One Mississippi, especially for bringing us all together in support of our natural resource, the Mississippi River, which I'm standing in front of right now, frozen, but still beautiful in Minnesota. The first poem I'm going to read is titled, That Was Only Yesterday. Coated in a stark blue, a spell takes over anything that moves. Electrified by the struggling sun, defying gravity, the flakes descend, one by one. Taking their time, a talent for arresting human attention. 1, 2, 3. The time of year that time forgot, and the snowflakes that slowly drop. Yesterday, the steam rose from across the river like a hasty fire made on the island. Water scrambling for breath, overtaken with a deep sleep. Where are the eagles now? How can they rest? White tails escaped across the grays, and that was only yesterday. It's 14 degrees, but I'm outside. The next poem I'm going to read is titled Pileated Woodpecker, Take 2. So you fly again in February, scalloping through the brisk wind, the non-committal type, flaky and a flight risk, following the 2 white circles, a reverse domino, a black kite, from worn wooden light post to the next. When I approach, you hide your head, a tiny boxer weaving from left to right. I still see you, and again, you're off in flight. I'll just say that One Mississippi is a very special organization uniting all of the communities on the entire river, which I support. The water starts up in northern Minnesota and travels all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. It's the heart of this country and rich with stories, resources, history, and culture. Thank you again for attending, and I'm going to end with a last poem. Why the river? No stop signs, no street lights, no billboards stating McDonald's. at the next right. If I have an interest, if the river serves my pleasure, no phone call after a few moments requesting a survey of my leisure. No timeline, no deadline, no white line nor dashed. The only line I see is the line that I cast. She speaks in only wind and of course also water. She's usually quiet unless flooding. Then I bow humbled as one of her daughters. And here's a picture of the river. That's Spring Lake Park. Thank you everybody again. Have a good afternoon and a good night. Bye.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Cole. Gretchen, was there anything else you wanted to share right now?
No, just a reminder that we will have a drawing for a signed copy of Cole's book as well as Paul's book at the end. So we're just so grateful to Cole for donating and to Paul for donating copies of their books that we can offer to all of you. So thanks.
Hello and welcome to the
Fantastic. All right. Well, without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce friend of the river, Paul Schneider. Paul, please take it away. And let me know if you want me to stop. Well, I will stop sharing the screen. Let me know if you need to. Hold on, Paul. You're on mute.
I did not prepare anything to share on the screen, so I don't need to have access to it. Thank you all. Thanks the River Network. Thanks One Mississippi. That was beautiful poetry by Cole, and just made me nostalgic for the period in my life when I was privileged enough to spend a lot of time exploring the river. I love and thank you also, Michael. That was good times back there in Davenport. Yeah, so I just want to say a few words and not go rambling on too long, because I often find that the questions people have open up more interesting avenues, and I could talk forever. I mean, I spent probably 5 years writing Old Man River, and I could start today and spend 5 years and write an entirely different book, which isn't to say that I have any regrets about Old Man River. It was, for me, I've written 5 books, and that was by far the most fun, the most challenging, and it's the most recent because I took a hiatus to become an editor for a while. And I feel like it was the book I set out to write, and it took me 4 other books before I got to the point of being able to write it. And I love the name One Mississippi because it is one Mississippi, but you can read into it so many different things. You could say, well, we only have one Mississippi, and therefore we should take care of it, which is true. But it's also true that there's not one Mississippi. There are 1,000 Mississippis. And then when I came to begin to write this book, and I was working on it with my editor before we even began, you had to make a few decisions, and one of them I made early on was that I didn't want to write a book about my trip down the one Mississippi from Minnesota to New Orleans, not because that's a bad book idea. It's such a great book idea that there have been a number of really great books like that. And also I am more of a historian than a travel writer. And though I wanted to travel, and there is some travel in the book, for those of you who have read it know that, I felt that a book about traveling down the river was going to confine me in some ways. I didn't know a whole lot about the Mississippi other than what we all kind of know about the Mississippi. I mean, my mother is from St. Louis, so I had visited cousins there. My dad is from Wisconsin, so I visited cousins there. I had been across it and seen it. And, you know, of course, I knew Mark Twain, and I knew, you know, Louis Armstrong and New Orleans a little bit. But I had this idea, and my editor agreed that there are a number of lenses through which you can look at all of American history. You could write all of American history through the lens of slavery and race relations, or through the lens of the economic disparity or industrialization, any of these things, and they all would create a true or a viable history of the country. And the river, the Mississippi in particular, seemed to be, in a way, a lens that could encompass more than just the history of the river, but the history of the country. And so again, with the one Mississippi, like I said, I could start and write this book over again, and it would be an entirely different book, and it would be just as accurate or just as much a true history. So there's not one history either. When I embarked on it, I thought, oh, the Mississippi River is a lens that we can look at all of American history. But I had really no idea how true that, or broad that notion really was. For the Mississippi is in so many ways at the heart of the history of how we got to where we are today as a continental nation. I hesitate to even say the history of our country, because there's so many more thousands of years in which the history of other people's cultures were based on the Mississippi. And even in the European period, there's 200 years of history when it wasn't American. It was, it was this really 200-year struggle between Spain and then eventually primarily England and France over who was going to control the Mississippi. And the outcome of that, it's hard to imagine how different our culture today would be had the French ended up with the basin, or had the Native Americans been able to hang on to it. So there's and even these other lenses, slavery, the way slavery developed in the United States is based in many ways on the river. The internal slave trade, the expansion to really industrial cotton plantations is part of the spread. Historians of the Civil War would argue that really it was the battle for the river that turned the tide for the Union. It was on the river that both Grant and Sherman came to Lincoln's attention. It was the fall of Vicksburg that really cut the Confederacy in half and really marked the turning point. Industry, we don't think about it now, but before there were railroad, the steel industry, heavy industry in the United States was developed in Pittsburgh to build steamships to go down, well, more correctly, to come back up the Mississippi. So those industries grew there. Music, you can't really look at American music without looking at the river and all of its tributaries. Before there was recording and before there was radio, there weren't a lot of places where different musical cultures mixed it up on a regular basis. So it's not by accident that New Orleans is such a heartland of American music. It's the place where French shanties came down the upper Mississippi and country tunes came trickling out of the Tennessee River, and cowboy tunes, everything wound up there on the river, and people traded songs. So this American vernacular of music is invented there. really probably all the way up to hip hop and rap, you might be able to say we're not creatures originally of the Mississippi River Basin, but certainly jazz, rock and roll, country, those are all musical forms that were birthed on the river. Any way you want to look at it, you end up back in the Mississippi. And now here we are, with climate change and the environment, and surprise, surprise, the Mississippi's right in the heart of that as well. Obviously there are 1,000 ways we need to change to become more resilient and live lighter on the land. But you mentioned the Gulf, the hypoxia in the Gulf. There really are, and now the river's hopefully not permanently drying up, but we're right in the middle of it. And I don't have a lot to say about that because that's looking forward, and my book is really looking into the past. But I think it remains true, even though, as Cole sort of said when people heard she was moving to the Mississippi, there's a lot of Americans who live on the coast who are like, oh, that's just flyover country. But we can't really fix anything about America, and we can't really understand America without understanding the waters between the Appalachians and the Rockies. And so that's the other thing about One Mississippi that's kind of funny to me, because, and I know it's nice to talk to this virtual group because they're from all over the basin, and up in Dubuque or wherever we were, sometimes I get talking about the Ohio and the Missouri and the Tennessee, and people are like, wait a minute, we're here to talk about Mississippi. And it is true that the name of the Mississippi starts in Minnesota and ends in New Orleans, but the beauty of the beast really is that you can't understand it without the Ohio that brings in twice as much water as any two other tributaries, or the Missouri, which is longer, or any of those Western rivers. And it's just such a wonderful resource. And I'm so grateful to organizations like One Mississippi and like the River Network that are looking out for it and taking care of it. And I think the key, this idea of linking people together who are interested is also really one of the vital keys to moving forward, because I was really fortunate to travel thousands of miles on the various rivers. And like I said, I didn't get in a canoe up there in Itasca and go to New Orleans, but I did a lot of traveling on the river, on many of the rivers. And one of the things that was surprising to me is how undervalued it appears to be as a recreational and spiritual and kind of just natural resource for the people who live near it. And that's not the people who live near its fault. That's partly the fault of, a host of historical reasons. It's less true the farther north you go, because it's so extraordinarily beautiful up there, and the dams, which have their problems, make it feel safer and more accessible to boaters and whatnot. But it is the case that I think, and this was something that I learned actually more from my first book, which was a regional history also, but it was about the Adirondacks, which is the first kind of place where American imagination and government concocted this idea of wilderness. And I'll just cut to the chase of the point on that is if you look at this long history of this area that has been preserved, which is the size of the state of Massachusetts, it's bigger than all, any 4 national parks combined. Whenever the loggers and the hunters and the fishermen and the tree huggers decided that they couldn't find common ground, the Adirondacks lost ground. And whenever they could figure out that, well, we do need to have a little bit of logging, but we also want to protect the fish, and we also want to have places where these people can just hug trees that have never been cut, land got preserved. So coalitions and understanding, meeting people at the river, I'll meet you at the river, I think is the way forward. And I think that that's what One Mississippi, I feel like that's what you guys are up to. And I want to thank you for that. I could keep going, but I might rather see if there's stop and see if there's any questions on anything specific. It has been almost 10 years since I wrote the book, so please fact check anything I say. If it's okay with you guys, I'll just I open it up for questions, and if there are none, I have other things I can ramble on about.
I love that, Paul. That sounds great. I do want to make sure we get to the drawing well before the hour closes. So how about this? I see 2 questions right off the bat in the chat. Why don't we go there? We'll do the drawing, and then we'll come back and continue the Q&A. Does that sound good, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's start with Lori Nelson. And I'll just invite people as well. I don't need to be the one reading your questions. Lori, if you want to get off mute and ask Paul your question, I will pause for 3 seconds and let you do that.
Oh, okay. So my question was, I wanted to take a trip down the river, and I thought it'd be fun to do like a side wheeler kind of thing. And I mentioned it to my kids thinking they would maybe think it was fun too. And they were like, oh, that's about slavery and the plantations and the privilege and the inequality. And they kind of made me feel like it was disrespectful to do that kind of trip. And I just wanted to know how you felt about that kind of thing.
Well, that's a good question. And I
with a hard one, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question, and it's a question that it comes up in a lot of different ways wherever you turn now. Without knowing what kind of program is on the side wheeler, if there were some program that was disrespectful of it. But I personally, as a historian, I don't believe in not telling the stories that we share, the good and the bad. And as a point of history, the side wheelers they did play a big role in slavery eventually, but they were not developed as part of they were developed to bring people back up the river from New Orleans. You could get down the river floating back then because there weren't dams, and there, and probably the sort of association of it with slavery, comes more from the movies, from Hollywood, because it is true that there were a lot of slaves taken down the river in the bottom of the side wheelers later in the 1830s and 40s, when the international slave trade had been eliminated, and basically the northern plantations in Missouri and Kentucky and up the Ohio River, well, not so much the Ohio, but up in Kentucky and elsewhere, were exporting slaves down to the South. But I would, if I would not say, oh, I'm going to close my eyes and not go on a side wheeler because it's associated with slavery. I would say, have your kids read a little more, maybe watch watch those movies maybe, and talk about it. But I don't think per se it helps either our understanding of slavery or our progress toward a more just society to just say, I'm not going on a side-wheeler boat. That would be my interpretation of it. But it's a tough question. But I think the answer isn't putting our heads in the sand. It's looking the bad in the face and saying, yes, they played a role in slavery.
Thanks for getting us.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for getting us rolling, Lori. We'll go to Lauren next, if you would like to come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Paul. I was wondering, sounds like you spent a lot of time researching and writing the book, and I was wondering if you could point to one most memorable, surprising, or impactful piece of research you discovered while writing, or maybe one piece that you feel like more Americans should know about.
That's a good question too. That's a hard one, however. I mean, there's not really a most, but I think really for me, what I really, maybe because I had already written a couple of books of American history, so I was more familiar already with the history of the United States. But I would say the parts of the research that I found most impactful were into the 10,000 years of Native American cultures that came and went, or didn't go, but I mean that rose and transformed into other cultures or other societies long before the first Europeans showed up. And I wasn't surprised, because I have found in other books and other projects, how beautiful the artwork that Native Americans created was, and how sophisticated their cultures and their stories were. But it was really kind of eye-opening and wonderful to have the opportunity to really dig into those mound cultures at Cahokia, and really even more than Cahokia, the effigy mounds up there at the top of the river are just magical. And the Serpent Mound out on the Ohio is, I mean, it's like something. I met people there who thought it was made by aliens. Still, like to this day, like that's, you thought that kind of wisdom went out in 1920s. But anyway, so I guess I would have to say that. But there were many, many impactful discoveries along the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, that definitely gets the Q&A warmed up. Paul will be ready to receive more questions right after we pause and do our book giveaway. Gretchen, I'm going to pass it right over to you. I guess there's really no need for me to share the screen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael. So as we have mentioned several times, we are going to be doing a drawing for both of these books. And I just wanted to take a moment again, just to thank both Cole Williams and Paul Schneider for donating both the books that we are giving away today and the books that we are offering to donors with a minimum donation. And because of you, we have raised over $3,200 so far towards our goal of $5,000 that we hope to hit by the end of the year. So your donations, your contributions, Cole and Paul, have truly made a difference for the river. So we're extremely grateful. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm going to start with Cole's book, Hear the River Damned, and we have a random number generator which I am going to go ahead and pull a number.
You can get the drum roll going, people.
Yes, yes, drum roll, please. Okay. So Diane, Brady, Layton, I believe that you are here. If you're here, please unmute. I know she was here earlier. Okay. Michael, should I draw another name?
Yep, do another. You have to be present right now for the drawing.
Okay. Okay. Can't do that one. And we are not awarding this to staff. Sorry. John Anfinson. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Anfinson. You
Well,
have
I didn't
one.
expect that, so thank you. I will look forward to getting that.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and draw for Paul's book, Old Man River. Rebecca Power. I know I saw it. Rebecca, are you still here?
Yes, I am, but
Oh,
I would suggest you draw another number. It's
you already
lovely. Yeah.
have this.
No, I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead. Draw,
Okay.
draw another one. Thank
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this opportunity with somebody else.
you. Mhm.
23. And a lot of people have already reserved this book. So that number is, that person's not here, 36. Deborah Brister, are you still here? Yes, I see you're here.
I am.
Awesome. Do you already have this book? Would you like us to send this to you?
I don't. I would love that book. And here I'll put my camera on here too. Just to mention this, I'm executive director with our neighborhood association. We're actually going to be doing a Mississippi themed spring festival this year. And it's really exciting to hear the conversations, and I look forward to reading this book. I'm so delighted, and I would like to extend the invitation to everybody that is on this call too. We're in Northeast Minneapolis, so but anyway, I can give the coordinators of this my information if anybody's interested. But I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this call, and thank you so much for the book. I'm super excited.
That is wonderful. Congratulations. That's and thanks for sharing that opportunity. That's wonderful, and we'll love to get that information and share it with all our river citizens. So yeah,
Absolutely awesome. Thank you.
wonderful. Good. So I'll just continue on, Michael. As I've mentioned, the drawing today is not the only way to get these books, and so many of you actually have already made donations, or you've supported our work by taking action in other ways. And we can't tell you how grateful we are to each and every one of you on this call. But just wanted to note for those maybe who haven't donated, or who donated and received one book and perhaps would like to now receive a copy of the other book, it's not too late. Misa is going to be putting a link to donate in the chat. And I think I've mentioned that we've already raised over $3,200 thanks to your generosity. So we could not do the work that we're doing without each and every one of you. And we are so grateful to all of you. So thank you.
Well, I knew there would be surprises based on how this event started. Deborah, can't wait to connect with you. I am based here myself in Minneapolis, just on the other side of the river from you. So looking forward to connecting further. Continuing, and congratulations, John, and to everyone that, has won a book. Good to see you, John.
Great to see you as well, Michael.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get back to it. We got Paul in the hot seat here, author, historian, celebrated American figure. We have our next question is from Vera, from who we know from the Wetlands Initiative, a member of the Mississippi River Network in Illinois. Vera, what is your question for Paul?
Yeah, hi. So Paul, you had mentioned that you traveled the whole length of the river and told some of those stories in your book. I wondered if you could share a neat or really memorable wildlife encounter you had when you did that trip. Oh, you're muted.
Paul, you are enlightening us with such a wonderful story, but we can't hear you.
Sorry.
You're on mute.
I turned it on mute for a moment because there was some noise in my house. Sorry. It would be incorrect to say that I traveled the entire length of the river. I have not yet done that. As I said, I didn't want to do just one trip, so I did a lot of various pieces. But most of the river, all of the Ohio, much of the Missouri, and the majority of the Mississippi. And in terms of, there were just so many wonderful moments, but I would say, since you mentioned wildlife, the most memorable was probably my son and I got in kayaks in St. Louis and went down about to, I guess, a little below New Madrid, and we were camping on islands and sandbars. Fortunately, the river was not as low as it is now, from what I read, but it was low. And actually, we ended up getting off the trip early because it's funny how you can read the Army Corps charts and tell that you're going to be not find any campsites in 2 days, so you better make some other plans. But we camped on there was one sandbar island that we camped on, and in the middle of the night we just started hearing coyotes everywhere, and they were, I did not want to open up the tent and look out, but they were, right around the campsite checking it out. And it was, it felt like a real encounter. So that was certainly the one that I know he and I remember. Just kind of like, what are we going to do? But I don't think we were ever really in any danger. But there was a lot of it sounded like a lot, and they sounded pretty close. Yeah, it wasn't. So that was one. I have to say the invasive carp that jump. Because I also did a long trip down the Ohio, and in that case was in a very small boat with a motor, so I was going a little faster than a kayak, fast enough that these fish would jump up, and those are encounters you don't want either if you're going, at a reasonable clip in an open boat. But probably, in addition to those, there were just so many mornings waking up, because I mostly camped, or in the case when I went down in the little tin boat, the little aluminum boat, I had a little platform. I just anchored up and slept on it, and they're just mornings when the mist comes off and the birds start to wake up and the whole river just wakes up is sort of, magical. We all know that. I mean, you don't have to go on some epic adventure. You just have to go down to the river often enough. There's a fantastic description, as you probably all know, in Life on the Mississippi by Twain of the morning, of the mornings on the Mississippi. That's just one of the most beautiful sections. We don't always think of him as writing sort of lyrical nature things, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, really cool. Thanks.
There was a question before that one on the list by somebody I noticed about cliches. I don't know if we skipped them, but I thought.
Yeah, Michael, this is John. I'd asked that question. And Paul, the question really is for, organizations like One Mississippi and the network and other environmental organizations on the river. Everybody talks about the mighty Mississippi, the great river, old man river, and then once you get beyond that, it's like, so what makes it mighty? Why is it mighty? What's so important? And you started with that, of what that is, but it seems like it's really hard at times to translate that general feelings as maybe Mississippi is one of the greatest rivers in the world into actually caring about it and doing something for organizations like the network. How do you address that?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not necessarily an historical question. I mean, I'm convinced, so I can tell you, for me, I guess I sort of mentioned it a bit when I was saying why I think having a network of people who are, I think the way you get away from the cliches is getting down, actually getting your feet wet and getting to the river, so I think the events that you have, the river cleanups, the, whatever they may be, the festivals, those don't feel like you're actually getting phosphates out of the river or you're taking down a dam. But I think getting past the cliche is making it so, it is getting people to the place where they recognize that they are in that river or on that river. Before the show started, I don't know if we had anybody there. I was talking about how I'd been reading about how all the fish in the Gulf of Mexico are full of like human drugs. Everything from caffeine to Viagra to whatever it is. Knowing that every action we take kind of winds up somewhere else is, I think, the way to get past the cliche. I mean, the big picture is, of course, what we want to keep our eye on, but it's the small picture. I guess that's what I would say, but it's more, but that's more of like a strategic organizing question. But my answer would be to get people, get their feet wet, get damp. Because Cole mentioned how people, when she said something about how when she first moved, people were like, "Oh God, that river is so dirty. It's so, what you would never eat fish out of it." Da, 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 da. I mean, my love of rivers wasn't born on the Mississippi, even though both my parents are from river states. I grew up near the Connecticut River, and when I was a kid, it was just like that. Parents would say, "Oh my God, that we're not supposed to go near it," but we, being kids, went and jumped off the railroad bridges into it and swam in it and whatever. So kids are like, a good route in. But the other half of the Connecticut story is, as depressed as we all may be about where we are environmentally, it's also the case It is so much better now than it was before the Clean Water Act, and then it was in the 60s and early 70s, and that's true on the Mississippi as well. So I think the other way to get past the cliches is to sort of point out how much progress we have made, that it's not hopeless. The river was dead, or, not dead because it's come back to life, but I think that's the other thing. I think small interactions with the river and making sure that we don't just tell the story about how bad things are, but we tell the story of how much progress has been made, and that it was made by people telling their congressmen and women to get it done. So it's made on a small level and a big level. And it's only made, we shouldn't have to wait for the river to catch on fire to demand action. Anyway, that would be my answer to that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If I may just add on to the top there, I know Mark River on the call, who, we saw in the photo earlier, he would not agree more with getting people's feet wet, right? Building that relationship, building that connection. I'll just add on as well, reading your book, Paul, reading Cole's book. John himself here is a fellow historian and author of The River We Have Wrought. And I would also offer that this is another way to build that relationship with the river that leads to caring, that leads to action, and in addition to things that are more experiential, like getting your feet wet. So there's so many ways, right, that people can develop that relationship with the river, and it's something that we talk about all the time within One Mississippi, and try to support. So like Deborah sharing today, your upcoming event, many of you, as I started this call, have these different pieces of this puzzle that gets to some of these goals like Paul is sharing. So just wanted to add that on top. And, I'm noticing the time. Paul, a couple questions did come in. Are you able to answer another one or two, or do you need to jump off right now, which is totally fine?
No, I can answer another question or two, but I actually want to add one thing to what you just said. And it's great to know that there's another writer, another history buff in the audience. Not just because I want to sell books. I think what you said about getting your feet wet for me also means learning the stories, learning what was there before you. And I don't really, although I do ascribe to the old saw, we study history to prevent, so we don't make the same mistakes. We do make the same mistakes over and over again, and a lot of our politicians are pretty versed in history. So it's not clear to me that works. But I also think of history when the history of a region, and I've written local histories as opposed to national histories or regional histories. I think for me the analogy is kind of like a sports fan. If you don't know anything about baseball, you might go and say, okay, this is a fun game. But those people who are nutty sports fans, who know the history of the game, they know every player, they know all the rules, they know everything, they enjoy the game way more. The aficionado of anything, the opera fan who knows all the operas, enjoys the opera they've heard 20 times more than the person who knows nothing about opera enjoys it the first time they hear it. So knowing the history of where you live is also a way of enhancing your experience of the present. It's like the more you know about who walked on the ground or swam in the river before you, the richer your own life is. I mean, so it can be self-serving in addition to being like, oh, we need to learn this so we don't screw it up again. So I would just reiterate that. And of course, buying my book and John's book are first steps. If his name was John, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Anyway, yeah, I can answer a couple more questions.
Okay. Wonderful. The next one that came in, maybe is a quicker one. Jack, are you interested in coming off mute and asking your question? I can, I'm going to push a button and a pop-up might show on your screen. There it is.
Okay. Yeah, I live in Columbia, Missouri. My best friend going all the way back to high school lives in Calhoun County, which is a peninsula between the Mississippi and the Illinois River. And I was just wondering if you were familiar with that area and the Golden Eagle ferry that you take from Missouri over there.
I know where it is, and I've been past it, but I wish I had been able to spend more time there. The Illinois is such a beautiful river. I mean, somebody asked earlier about the you know, what parts of the history I didn't know, and I really had not ever read those early French accounts of the Illinois and the horrific wars that took place there between the Iroquois and the local Native Americans. But it is such an astonishingly beautiful stretch of river. I wish I knew the peninsula better, but I can't. I would be there's a lot of more places to go. Fortunately, that's what's also great about how big the river is.
It's a great place, especially, you know, in the spring and summer. They have quilt festivals on there, and they have apple orchards, and it's a beautiful place. And there's a lot of river towns along there.
Yeah. I'll try to make a point of getting there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just on a quick personal note, Jack, I know you're part of our River Citizen community, and so we got I have your contact info. I'd love to follow up with you about some of those local opportunities and chat that area more. When I canoed down the river, I camped right next to that ferry, and it was quite a thing to behold from the tent and just watching it all happen. Right. So I look forward to chatting with you.
Okay, good.
Perry, question about music. Perry, are you able to come off mute? Go ahead. I will just go ahead and read it. I know Perry well, and he's often double duty, working another job as well while he joins some of these events. Perry asked, do you think your relationship with the river has affected your musical tastes or interests?
Yeah, it probably has, but I couldn't necessarily say. I had pretty broad musical interests already. I'm not to toot my own horn, no pun intended, but I would say that I guess I probably have listened to a little more, actually, not the jazz and stuff that we all associate with the river, because I was already kind of a fan of that and a lame amateur practitioner. But I've been listening to a little more like country music and Western stuff, probably since doing the book, and appreciating it. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of music that I wish I could have heard, because the descriptions of music, and there are books, and there are thousands of lyrics of songs that fiddle songs that people sang on the flatboats going down, but nobody really knows what they actually sounded like. I think and though I'm not necessarily able to, I'm not enough of a musicologist or a music historian to be able to know what came from where. I'm also those early accounts, and I did know from studying music history a bit in college and high school about African and African American influences on music, but there's less known, but it's clear that there was also a pretty good Native American percussion and musical, influx in those early years. And the movies, gets back to like what the movies portray as Native American drumming is like, tom-toms beating some warpath thing. But they were in fact, the original accounts, astonishing musicians, which should astonish no one, but they were. And those are kind of impacts that I know are there. I know they're still in there, but we didn't hear them. So in some ways, the answer to the question is, I'm melancholic because I learned about a lot of music that I'll never hear. I guess that makes sense.
It's a very articulate response, Paul. Very deep. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good, I had not thought of that before.
Well, I think that's going to bring us to the closing of our event. Speaking of good questions, everyone, all 5 or 6 of those questions were fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for
thank you.
Yeah, presenting today, but also going into the Q&A. I just put in the chat, if you didn't have a chance to yet open the action alert that I mentioned earlier, the link is in there. And the event end of year fundraising form is in there as well that Gretchen mentioned. Feel free to click those, then they'll open up and you can check them out after the event closes. I'm going to just quick pass it over to the executive director of the Mississippi River Network, Kelly McGinnis, to just help us close out here.
I just want to thank everybody again for not only joining us today, but for the plethora of ways that you support our work, that you support your communities, the people of water, land, and wildlife. And I mentioned this in the chat, but anything from reading the fantastic newsletters that Michael curates, attending events, taking advocacy action, your donations, again, caring for your communities, caring for people, caring for water. It makes a huge difference. And we appreciate you immensely. We couldn't do our work if it wasn't for you. We have a vision we're working towards that of a healthy and vibrant Mississippi River for all. And I'm glad to have you all as our partners to work towards this vision that, we may not get to in our lifetimes, but we will get there. So just thank you very much. And especially thank you to Paul and Cole for participating in this author event today and for your time. And then an extra special thank you to the MRN staff and especially Michael and Gretchen for coordinating and curating and putting together this amazing event. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. We'll see you at the river soon. Gretchen.
Thank you all. This was wonderful.
Thanks, all.
Really, really appreciate having everyone here.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, keep your eye on your email. Like Kelly said, we send out a monthly newsletter with opportunities like this. And again, we just want to keep building this community and keep learning from you all and working together. Paul, thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks all. Stay in touch.